Some good news for all South Africans looking forward to the arrival of the COVID-19 vaccine is that medical aids will shoulder some of the costs, even if you are not a member. The Medical Schemes Act has made the coronavirus vaccination a prescribed minimum benefit. This means it is compulsory for them to pay for all members to be inoculated. The Discovery Medical Scheme has agreed to co-fund South Africa's procurement of the vaccine to help ensure that at least 2/3 of the population receives the jab by the end of this year. That's what Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize told us over the weekend, this past Sunday. Let's get you more details on the story now. We're joined on this private-public partnership. Dr. Ronald Whelan is Chief Commercial Officer for Discovery Health. Dr. Whelan, good morning. Thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM report. Tell us more about the discussions with the South African government. The issue of vaccines is, of course, an important one for medical aid schemes, but for South Africans, it's become such an important issue over the past couple of weeks, as we've been all discussing how little information we have about even a rollout plan. What can you tell us that perhaps hasn't been in the public domain?
Firstly, thank you for hosting us this morning, and good morning to you and your viewers. I think firstly worth mentioning, we're delighted to be supporting the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine as your Discovery Health, your medical scheme. As you would have heard in the media recently, your Discovery Health medical scheme allocated your funding for the COVID-19 vaccine way back towards the end of November already. It's a legal obligation for all medical schemes under the prescribed minimum benefits to provide access to COVID-19 vaccines for all beneficiaries of all medical schemes. As part of the structure that's been put in place now, what's really around this is that there's a cross-subsidization mechanism in place. So the medical schemes will not only fund the vaccination for their adult beneficiaries, somewhere around 7.2 million adult beneficiaries of medical schemes in South Africa, but it will also fund an additional 7.2 million vaccination for additional 7.2 million people in the public sector. That means, through this mechanism that's been put in place, over 14 million people will have access to vaccination through the medical scheme funding mechanism.
So it has a limited number of people. It's those 7.2 additional people. It's not sort of a widespread partnership to help fund the country's vaccination rollout plan.
Well, that's one aspect of the partnership. So you got to remember what we're doing is we're working together with government to ensure that all South Africans get access to the COVID-19 vaccination. So we've partnered with the government in supporting all initiatives to both fund and procure the vaccine for all South Africans. The funding mechanism is partly funded by government, partly funded by the Solidarity Fund, partly funded by medical schemes, as I've mentioned, and then partly funded by the business sector. But effectively, what we'll have is a pool of funding for us to go out and procure vaccines for everyone in South Africa. That gives us the best chance of getting the best prices globally, and more importantly, getting the vaccine into country quickly.
You talk about getting the best prices globally. There have been a number of headlines around negotiations that could have taken place as early as August of last year with Johnson & Johnson. There's also been discussions around Pfizer coming forward with a reduced rate for its vaccine of around $10. That offer apparently being made to the South African government. As you are part of this partnership with government, do you have any clarity on which direction we might go in terms of which vaccine and the cost of that vaccine?
Yeah, I think these are things that are evolving very quickly at the moment. There's a few important principles at play here. I think the first one is that all of the manufacturers globally have agreed to roll out the COVID vaccine in social solidarity. So the costs are as low as possible at the moment, and we're certainly seeing all of the manufacturers come to the party in terms of reducing your costs as far as possible. I think the second important principle is that as supply increases and as your manufacturing increases, there should be downward pressure on costs. These costs are wide ranging at the moment. It's only been a few weeks since many of the vaccines have been approved for use. In fact, we only have 3 approved for use in select countries globally at the moment. And there's a big pipeline of vaccines that will come into fruition over the next 3 to 6 months. And that will put downward pressure on costs. It's too early to speculate on both cost and volumes. We have some ranges that we're working on, but we'll continue to refine those over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, many people might say we find it strange that you're sort of reiterating what the health minister has said in many respects in terms of South Africa's vaccination rollout plan. You're saying that it's too early to speculate around prices or which vaccine we might go with. And that's as 29 other countries at last count already are well into their actual vaccination rollout. Do you think, Dr. Whelan, that we are lagging behind?
Well, I mean, certainly some countries have made significant progress. So the US in particular, the UK, Israel, and certainly countries across Europe. At the same time, there are other countries that are in a similar timeline as we are. So for instance, New Zealand is expecting vaccine towards the end of March. Australia is in a similar camp somewhere around March and April. They've done deals with AstraZeneca around their vaccine. So these things, it's an evolving landscape, and there were certainly some countries that made prepayments and made pre-orders. But as I said before, the supply chain is beginning to ramp up quite quickly. Our expectation is that we'll see a significant acceleration in manufacture of vaccines globally over the first 6 months of next year, and then even more accelerated during the second 6 months from last year.
Yeah.
Insofar as I'll start.
Please go ahead.
I guess insofar as our stance, as I mentioned before, Discovery Health, as with all of the other medical schemes, is really working hand in hand with the National Department of Health, with the presidency, with various other plans in the private sector, so that we can accelerate vaccine procurement for all of South Africa. I think it's a very unique public-private cooperation, and a much needed one during this time of the pandemic.
Insofar as the fact that we are not alone in terms of lagging behind, or let's say we haven't started our vaccine rollout program as yet, as many other countries have not done either, should we, in your perspective, have more detail around, real detail around when it will start, what the criteria is for those who will qualify in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3? Just in terms of having more detail around how our vaccination program will work than we have now.
Oh, absolutely. The detail is being worked on extensively at the moment. As you know, we've got a public-private vaccine task force led by Discovery Health, Discovery CEO Adrian Gore. That includes both public and private participants. I can tell you that task team is working tirelessly, and we're supporting that task team as far as possible around negotiations and discussions with manufacturers across the globe. We're moving as quickly as possible to get those commercial agreements in place. In parallel with that, there's of work underway at the moment. You're planning for the distribution and vaccination of the population in South Africa. And as the minister mentioned in the address earlier on this week, we will make sure that we inform the public as to the timelines, as to the priority groups, as that information comes available.
Well, thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM Report. Dr. Roland Whelan is Discovery's Chief Commercial Officer. It's a story that we're billing as a bit of a good news story this morning as South Africans wait for more detail around our country's vaccination rollout plan. But medical schemes, we're now told, will shoulder some of the costs of vaccines, even for non-members. We're told 7.2 million beneficiaries will be able to get the vaccine as part of their prescribed minimum benefits, but that's in addition to 7.2 million non-beneficiaries, those who are not members of the medical schemes.